Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you have ever looked through an old jar of coins, a forgotten collection, or even the loose change sitting in a drawer, you may have wondered whether one of those ordinary-looking coins could actually be worth a fortune. Today, we are taking a fascinating look at the coins. Coin number 1. This 1962 Roosevelt Dime without a mint mark. A coin that can attract serious attention from collectors when the date, condition, preservation, and rarity all come together. In this video, we will explore the history of the 1962 Roosevelt Dime, explain what the missing mint mark means, examine the importance of very fine condition, discuss the factors that can dramatically influence value, and look at the stated market figure of $134. Most importantly, we will explain why collectors should never judge an old coin simply by its face value or by its age. The Roosevelt Dime is one of the most recognizable coins in American numismatic history. First introduced in 1946, the coin was created to honor Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States. Roosevelt remains especially significant to the history of the dime because of his connection with the March of Dimes and the fight against polio. When the United States Mint introduced the Roosevelt Dime, the design featured a portrait of Roosevelt on the obverse and symbols representing liberty, peace, and strength on the reverse. This design has remained remarkably durable and continues to appear on American dimes today. Now let us focus on the coin at the center of today's discussion, the 1962 Roosevelt Dime without a mint mark. At first glance, it may look like an ordinary silver dime from the early 1960s. But the details are what matter in coin collecting. A missing mint mark is not automatically an error, because some USP mint facilities traditionally produced coins without mint marks. Therefore, when examining a 1962 Roosevelt dime, the first step is to understand where the coin was manufactured and whether the absence of a mint mark is normal for that issue. The 1962 Roosevelt Dime was produced during an important period in American coinage. The United States was still using a silver composition for Roosevelt dimes, and the country was only a few years away from the major change in U.S. coinage composition that occurred in 1965. That means a genuine 1962. Roosevelt dime has historical importance not only because of its presidential design, but also because it belongs to the final era of regular circulating American silver coinage. One of the most important things collectors look for is the condition of the coin. In this video, the example we are discussing is described as being in very fine condition. Very fine, commonly abbreviated as VF in professional numismatics, represents a circulated coin that still retains substantial detail. It is not a pristine, uncirculated coin, but it should show more design detail than a heavily worn example. The hair, facial features, lettering, date, and other important areas should remain sufficiently clear to help collectors identify the coin and evaluate its overall quality. When examining a very fine 1962 Roosevelt dime, the first area to inspect is the obverse. The obverse features President Roosevelt facing left. Look closely at the hair, forehead, cheek, jawline, and neck. On a heavily circulated dime, these areas can become smooth and lose their original definition. On a very fine example, however, noticeable design detail should remain. Collectors carefully examine these areas because the amount and quality of remaining detail can help determine whether the coin genuinely fits the claimed grade. The date is another critical feature. On the 1962 Roosevelt dime, the numbers forming the date should be clearly visible. A weak or heavily worn date can make identification difficult and may reduce collector interest. If the date is sharp and well-defined, it becomes much easier to compare the coin with known examples and determine whether anything unusual is happening. A 1962 Roosevelt dime without a mint mark can therefore be an important example for collectors, but the absence itself must be interpreted correctly. You need to consider the date, the minting practices of the period, the coin's composition, the physical characteristics, and whether the coin has any genuine minting anomaly. This is where careful examination becomes much more important than simply looking at the coin under normal room lighting. Another major factor is the coin's surface. Collectors want to know whether the dime has been cleaned, scratched, polished, damaged, exposed to harsh chemicals, or otherwise altered. A coin may look bright and shiny to an inexperienced viewer after cleaning, but professional collectors often recognize that unnatural brightness can actually hurt the coin's desirability. Original surfaces are extremely important in numismatics. Imagine finding a 1962 Roosevelt dime that has been sitting untouched for decades. Perhaps it came from an old family collection or a forgotten group of silver coins. The surface might show natural toning, small marks from circulation, and the subtle signs of age that collectors expect. Such a coin can be much more interesting than an example that has been aggressively polished. The goal is not simply to make the coin look shiny. The goal is to preserve its original character. The reverse of the Roosevelt dime is equally important. The design includes a torch in the center, with an olive branch and an oak branch positioned around it. The inscriptions United States of America, E pluribus unum, and 1 dime complete the design. On a circulated coin, the highest points of these elements may show wear. A very fine example should still retain a considerable amount of design detail. Collectors also pay close attention to the lettering. The letters should be examined for unusual shapes, doubling, cracks, missing details, or other abnormalities. If something appears strange, it should not immediately be declared a rare error. Many apparent errors are simply the result of normal wear, damage, scratches, dye deterioration, lighting, or post-mint alteration. Genuine mint errors require careful authentication. Next, coin number 2. This 1946 Roosevelt dime without a mint mark in black condition with a stated market value of $165. This is an especially fascinating coin because 1946 was the very first year of the Roosevelt dime series. The coin represents the beginning of one of America's longest-running circulating coin designs and its connection to President Franklin D. Roosevelt gives it a special place in American history. But before you assume that every 1946 Roosevelt dime without a mint mark is worth $165,000, it is important to understand exactly what makes a coin valuable, how mint marks work, and why condition, errors, varieties, and authentication are so important. The Roosevelt dime was introduced in 1946, shortly after the death of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt had died in April 1945, and the United States Mint moved quickly to create a circulating coin honoring him. The new dime entered circulation on January 30th, 1946, which was Roosevelt's birthday. The design was created by chief engraver John R. Sinnock, whose initials JS appear on the obverse near the base of Roosevelt's neck. The coin was intended not only as a tribute to the president, but also as a symbol connected with the fight against polio and the March of Dimes. That historical background makes the 1946 Roosevelt dime different from an ordinary old coin. It is the first-year issue of the Roosevelt Dime series. Collectors who specialize in Roosevelt dimes naturally want an example from the beginning of the series. The 1946 issue marks the transition from the famous Mercury dime to the Roosevelt design and begins a silver era that lasted through 1964. The first-year status alone does not make every example extremely rare, but it gives the coin tremendous historical importance. The 1946 Roosevelt dime without a mint mark was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. During this period, Philadelphia coins generally did not receive a mint mark, so the absence of a letter on the reverse is normal for the Philadelphia issue. This is a crucial point for collectors. A missing mint mark on a 1946 Roosevelt dime should not automatically be described as an error. The mint mark location for the early Roosevelt dime is on the reverse, near the base of the torch. Denver coins carried a D, San Francisco coins carried an S, while Philadelphia examples had no mint mark. The Philadelphia issue had a very large production run. Numismatic references list roughly 255,001,946 Roosevelt dimes struck at Philadelphia, making the no-mint mark version the most plentiful of the three 1,946 mint varieties. Denver and San Francisco also produced 1,946 Roosevelt dimes, but Philadelphia produced by far the largest quantity. So if the Philadelphia version was produced in such large numbers, why can an individual example still attract enormous attention? This is where coin collecting becomes much more complicated than simply looking at the year and mint mark. A coin's value can depend on its grade, preservation, strike quality, surface condition, die characteristics, varieties, errors, toning, provenance, and certification. A common date can sometimes become highly valuable when an individual specimen has an extraordinary characteristic. The coin discussed in today's video is described as being in black condition. Black condition is not a standard professional grading designation such as good, very fine, extremely fine, about uncirculated, or mint state. Instead, the term may be used informally to describe a very dark or black-looking appearance. For a serious valuation, professional graders would evaluate the actual physical condition using recognized grading standards. This distinction is extremely important when discussing a claimed six-figure value. A dark appearance can have many causes. Natural toning can occur when silver reacts with its environment over a long period. A coin stored in an unfavorable environment may develop dark surfaces, while exposure to chemicals or contaminants can produce other forms of discoloration. Artificial toning and damage can also change the appearance. Therefore, simply seeing a black surface does not prove that the coin is rare or valuable. In fact, collectors should be extremely careful when dealing with dark or heavily toned silver coins. Never assume that dark coloration means the coin is more valuable. At the same time, never assume that dark coloration automatically means the coin is damaged. The surface must be examined carefully. Professional graders can determine whether the appearance is consistent with natural toning, environmental damage, cleaning, or another condition. Now let's examine this obverse of the 1946 Roosevelt Dime. The obverse displays a left-facing portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. His facial features, hair, forehead, cheek, jawline, and neck are among the most important areas to inspect when judging circulation wear. On a heavily circulated coin, these features become smooth. On a higher-grade coin, more original detail remains visible. The date 1946 appears beneath Roosevelt's portrait. Because this is the first year of the series, the date itself is especially important. Collectors want to make sure that the numerals are authentic and have not been altered. A weak or damaged date can create confusion, particularly when a coin has experienced heavy circulation or environmental exposure. Another interesting feature is the designer's initials. The initials JS belong to John R. Sinnock. When the Roosevelt Dime first appeared, rumors circulated about these initials, but the explanation is straightforward. They identify the designer. The initials are part of the coin's original design and should not be mistaken for an unusual mint mark or mysterious symbol. The 1946 Roosevelt Dime was made from 90% silver and 10% copper. It weighs approximately 2.50 grams, measures about 17.9 millimeters in diameter, and has a reeded edge. These specifications are extremely useful when authenticating an old dime. If a supposed 1946 Roosevelt Dime has a significantly incorrect weight or physical characteristics, that can be a reason for further examination. The silver composition is another reason these coins remain popular today. Roosevelt dimes dated from 1946 through 1964 belong to the classic U.S. silver dime era. Their precious metal content gives them a baseline value beyond their original 10-cent face value, although collector value can be considerably higher when a coin has exceptional characteristics. Next, coin number 3. This 1957 Roosevelt dime with a D mint mark, showing a dark or black appearance, and then learning that an exceptional example is being discussed with a stated market value of $145. That is exactly what we are exploring in today's video. The 1957 with D Roosevelt dime is a fascinating piece of American coinage because it comes from the silver era of the Roosevelt Dime series, carries the Denver Mint mark, and was struck more than 6 decades ago. But there is a very important distinction that every collector needs to understand. A $145,000 valuation would represent an extraordinary individual coin, not the normal value of every 1957 D Roosevelt dime. The Roosevelt Dime is one of the most recognizable coins in American history. The series began in 1946, honoring President Franklin Delano Roosevelt after his death in 1945. The Roosevelt's connection with the March of Dimes and the fight against polio made the dime a particularly appropriate denomination for his portrait. The design was created by John R. Sinnock, whose initials appear on the obverse. The Roosevelt dime has remained in production for decades, but the early examples from 1946 through 1964 are especially interesting because they were struck from a 90% silver and 10% copper composition. The 1957 with D belongs directly to this historic silver period. When we talk about the 1957 with D Roosevelt dime, the D is one of the first things collectors should examine. The D mint mark identifies the Denver Mint. For this issue, the mint mark appears on the reverse side of the coin near the bottom of the torch design. This tiny letter can immediately separate the 1957 with D from the Philadelphia issue, which was struck without a mint mark, and from other Roosevelt dime varieties from the same period. The 1957 with D Roosevelt dime had a reported mintage of approximately 113,354,330 coins. That is a substantial production figure, meaning the date and mint combination is not automatically an ultra-rare coin simply because it is more than 60 years old. Current reference information also identifies the coin as a 90% silver issue with a diameter of approximately 17.9 millimeters and a weight of about 2.5 grams. The phrase black condition is especially interesting. Black is not a standard professional grading category in American numismatics. Professional grading services use established grades such as good, very good, fine, very fine, extremely fine, about uncirculated, and various mint state grades. Therefore, when a coin is described as being in black condition, that description should be understood as an appearance or coloration rather than a formal grade. The date 1957 is extremely important. A collector should verify that the numerals are genuine and have not been altered. On an old circulated coin, scratches or surface damage can sometimes make parts of the date difficult to read. Good lighting and magnification can help reveal the details. Now turn the coin over and examine the reverse. The reverse design features the famous central torch, flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch. The inscription E pluribus unum appears across the upper portion, while United States of America surrounds the design and one dime identifies the denomination. The mint mark is one of the most important areas to inspect. On a genuine 1957 D Roosevelt dime, the small letter D should appear near the base of the torch. Because the mint mark is tiny, it can sometimes be difficult to see on a heavily worn or dark coin. Use a magnifying glass rather than assuming the letter is missing. Imagine two 1957 with D Roosevelt dimes. Both are genuine. Both contain silver. Both were struck at Denver. Both have the same date and mint mark. But one may have heavy circulation, scratches, environmental damage, and weak detail. The other might be exceptionally preserved, professionally certified, sharply struck, and possess a recognized rarity. The market can treat these two coins very differently. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 1957 with D Roosevelt dime, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos about rare American coins, valuable Roosevelt dimes, Lincoln wheat pennies, Jefferson nickels, Washington quarters, Kennedy half dollars, and other fascinating pieces of United States numismatic history. Share this video with your friends, family members, and fellow coin collectors. You never know who might have an old silver dime sitting in a drawer, an inherited collection, or a forgotten coin jar. And always remember, the biggest discoveries often begin with the smallest details. A tiny D mint mark, a distinctive surface, an unusual strike, or a genuine mint-made error can completely change the story of a coin. The next time you see an old Roosevelt dime, don't dismiss it because it looks ordinary. Pick it up. Look closely. Check the date. Check the mint mark. Study the surfaces. Learn its history. Because every old coin has a story, and sometimes the story is worth investigating. Thank you for watching. Keep searching, keep learning, protect your coins, and good luck with your next discovery.